Whispers among trees. Camping had always been an escape for me. The fresh air, the solitude, the way time seemed to stop amidst the trees. Yet after that one night in the depths of Thornwood Forest, my view of nature changed forever. Thornwood wasn't my first choice. I'd heard rumors about its uncanny silence and the tales locals would share in hushed tones. But as an avid camper, I thought, what's the worst that could happen? I wanted to feel brave, to conquer the unease whispered about in stories. By late afternoon, I'd settled into a picturesque clearing surrounded by tall, ancient-looking pines. The chirping of crickets and distant sounds of wildlife assured me. With my campfire crackling, I felt completely at ease. As the night deepened, I heard it. A soft whisper. I wrote it off as wind rustling the leaves. But then the whisper came again, clearer this time. Stay. Stay with us. I jumped to my feet, looking around. The fire's light seemed muted, unable to pierce the surrounding darkness. The trees loomed closer than I remembered. I tried to reason with myself, blaming my overactive imagination. I decided to sleep it off, but sleep was elusive. The whispers persisted, growing in number, as if the forest itself was beckoning me. Every rustle, every shadow began to take on a sinister edge. Hours felt like minutes. I tossed and turned, trying to drown out the voices. But then, an icy grip seized my ankle, pulling me. I scrambled out of my tent to see a half-buried figure, its form made of roots and moss, its eyes voids of darkness. It was pulling me towards the ground, attempting to drag me beneath the earth. I fought with every ounce of strength, managing to break free. But looking around, I realized the clearing was no longer empty. Figures made of forest matter. Some humanoid, some twisted amalgamations of roots, leaves, and soil surrounded me. Each echoed the same whisper, "Stay with us." Heart pounding, I grabbed my torch and made a desperate dash for what I hoped was the forest's edge. But Thornwood seemed to be alive, morphing and changing with every step. Paths that had been clear during the day now ended in impenetrable thickets or dropped into sudden ravines. All the while, the forest's inhabitants pursued me, their voices a relentless cacophony in my ears. Dawn was a mere promise on the horizon when I stumbled upon an old cabin. The structure looked as though it hadn't been touched in decades. The door was slightly ajar. Without any better option, and the whispers closing in, I ducked inside and bolted the door. The interior was dimly lit by the early morning light filtering through the cracks in the walls. Dust floated in the beams, and everything seemed untouched by time. On a table lay a journal, its pages yellowed and brittle. I flipped it open to the last entry. Thornwood is alive. It feeds on the souls of those who venture deep within, binding their spirits to its heart. I've managed to avoid its grasp, but I fear time is running out. To any who read this, know the truth. To escape, you must seek the heart of Thornwood and sever its tie. With the figures nearing and the whispers growing louder, I made a choice. Using the journal's hints, I searched the cabin and found a hidden passage leading underground. The tunnel ended in a vast chamber, illuminated by bioluminescent fungi. At its center stood a magnificent tree, its trunk pulsating and its roots sprawling in every direction. Faces, tormented and twisted, were etched into its bark, eyes that moved, silently pleading. Knowing this was Thornwood's heart, I approached, the whispers now a deafening roar. The ground shook as the figures from above tried to break in. With every ounce of courage, I started to hack at the tree with my camping axe. Each strike released anguished wails from the imprisoned souls. On the third strike, a blinding light consumed the chamber. I woke up at the forest's edge, the morning sun warming my face. Thornwood looked just as it had when I first entered, serene and undisturbed. No sign of the tree, the figures, or the cabin remained. It took me weeks to process what had happened. My research led me to old legends speaking of ancient woods with hearts that held the souls of the lost, but nothing concrete, nothing that fully explained my experience. Now, as we sit by this campfire, surrounded by the vastness of the forest, remember that nature has its guardians, its spirits. Thornwood's heart may have been silenced, but countless woods remain. And somewhere, in the depths of those trees, are whispers waiting for the next wanderer to venture just a little too deep. The Unseen Eyes of Elderwood. When I was in college, my friends and I often sought thrill in the wilderness. The Elderwood Forest, a sprawling terrain of old-growth trees, was our chosen destination one summer. Rumored to be haunted, it was a local legend. We thought it was just small-town folklore. We were wrong. 4 of us embarked on that fateful 2-day hike. The forest, with its towering trees and vast undergrowth, was breathtaking. Yet as we ventured deeper, a heavy feeling settled. By evening, we found a clearing with a lone ancient tree at its center. The tree was peculiar. Its bark had numerous hollows resembling human eyes. Intrigued, we set up camp nearby. As night fell, the forest grew eerily silent. We gathered around the campfire, sharing stories and laughs. That's when Dean, the most rational among us, looked uneasily towards the ancient tree and said, "Does anyone else feel like we're being watched?" I laughed it off. By who? Forest squirrels? But when I followed his gaze, my heart skipped a beat. The hollows in the tree looked different, more defined. They eerily resembled watching eyes. Old trees have character, I reasoned, hoping to ease the tension. But none of us slept easily that night. I woke up to soft murmurs in the early hours. Peering out of my tent, I saw shadows dancing around the tree, not cast by our extinguished campfire. The eyes on the tree appeared alive, watching, following every movement. Terrified, I alerted the others. Except Dean was missing. His tent was there, his belongings intact, but no sign of him. We called out, but the forest swallowed our voices. Dawn broke, unveiling a more shocking sight. The ancient tree now had one more eye, unmistakably resembling Dean's eye, filled with fear. Panicking, we decided to head back. But Elderwood had other plans. The path we had taken, marked by a trail of stones, was gone. Trees seemed to shift, creating a maze, leading us deeper into the forest. Hours felt like days. Eventually, Sarah, on the brink of a breakdown, spotted a dilapidated cabin. Hoping for refuge or a way out, we hurried inside. The cabin was bare, save for an old, dusty book on a wooden table. The title read, "Guardians of Elderwood." I opened it, revealing sketches of various trees, but one stood out, the ancient tree from our campsite. The note beside it read, "Elder Guardian. This tree sustains the spirit of Elderwood. Wanderers who disrespect the forest or venture during sacred nights get absorbed, becoming one with the Guardian, forever watching over Elderwood." Today, we realized, was one such sacred night, the night of whispering shadows. I recalled the legends I'd brushed off of people who disappeared in Elderwood, their eyes said to be forever imprinted on the trees. We had to leave and fast. Using the book as a guide, we managed to find a path leading out, marked by trees with white leaves. But as we walked, the unmistakable sensation of being watched grew stronger. Evening approached. As the forest darkened, we heard a voice, or rather a chorus of voices echoing, "Stay. Become one with Elderwood." The tree shadows seemed to stretch towards us, attempting to pull us in. Sarah tripped. As we tried to help her up, her face transformed into sheer terror. Looking down, her legs were ensnared by roots, pulling her into the ground. Mike and I held onto her, pulling with all our might, but the forest was stronger. Before our eyes, she was dragged beneath the surface, the ground settling as if she'd never been there. Devastated but desperate, Mike and I ran. Every rustle, every whisper felt like a threat. Hours later, exhausted, we saw the forest's edge. Freedom was within reach. But then Mike's foot got caught in a snare. Roots, like tentacles, wrapped around his legs, pulling him down. I grabbed his hands, trying to save him, but the pull was too strong. Our fingers slipped and he was gone, only his anguished scream echoing behind. I stumbled out of the forest, the weight of the loss of my friends pressing down on me. The local authorities didn't believe my story. They said they searched Elderwood but found no clearing, no ancient tree, no cabin. My friends were labeled as missing, presumed dead. Years have passed since that horrifying experience. But every year, on the night of whispering shadows, I'm plagued with nightmares. In them, I see Elderwood, the ancient tree at its center, and on its bark are the terrified eyes of Dean, Sarah, and Mike, forever watching, forever trapped. Now, as we sit by this campfire, let my tale be a warning. If you ever come across a forest that feels like it's watching, where the trees seem alive and paths shift like a living maze. Turn around. For some places on this earth are not meant for the living, and Elderwood is one such realm where the forest itself hungers for souls. The forest's secret. Gather around, because the tale I'm about to share isn't one I usually speak of, but with the darkness around us and the forest as our backdrop, it feels like the right time. Every word is true, even if every bone in your body tells you otherwise. Several years ago, I was an avid hiker. I loved being immersed in nature, the smell of earth and pine, the rustling of leaves. There was a particular forest, not too far from here, that I often visited. Each time I aimed to go deeper, exploring uncharted territories. One day, I came across a trail I had never seen before, marked by an old, weathered sign that read, "The Whispering Path." Intrigued, I followed it. The deeper I ventured, the more I noticed the silence. The typical forest sounds, birds, wind, even the distant babble of water, were absent. Instead, there was a soft, persistent whisper. It seemed to come from the trees themselves, a language I couldn't understand but felt drawn to. Hours passed. The sun started its descent, casting elongated shadows. That's when I saw it, a clearing up ahead with a single massive tree at its center. The whispers grew louder, more insistent. I felt an unexplainable urge to touch the tree. Its bark was unusually smooth, almost pulsating. As my fingers made contact, images flooded my mind. Visions of people, lost hikers like me, trapped within the tree. Their eyes pleaded for release, their mouths formed silent screams. Among them, I saw my own face, twisted in agony. Panicking, I withdrew my hand. The visions ceased, but the whispers grew angrier, more aggressive. The path I had come from vanished, replaced by thick, thorny underbrush. The only clear way was forward. Guided only by the dimming light and the unsettling whispers, I stumbled upon an old cabin. Its door was slightly ajar, emitting a faint, warm glow. Desperate for refuge, I approached. Inside, the cabin looked untouched by time. A lit fireplace, a table set for dinner, a radio playing a song from decades past. But what caught my attention was the wall opposite the entrance. It was adorned with countless sketches, each depicting that massive tree and its trapped souls, their faces contorted in despair. A voice broke my trance. "Beautiful, isn't it?" I spun around to find an old man, his eyes cloudy, skin ashen. "Who are you?" I stammered. "I was once like you," he replied. Drawn to the tree, curious about the whispers. But I learned the hard way. The tree feeds on souls, luring them, trapping them. I narrowly escaped, but not without a price. He gestured to his blinded eyes. "Why the sketches?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "To remember," he whispered, "and to warn. But few come here. The forest ensures that." I knew I needed to leave. The old man, sensing my urgency, handed me a small pendant. "Wear this," he said. "It will shield you from the tree's allure. Find the stream, follow it, and it will lead you out." Thanking him, I dashed out, wearing the pendant. The whispers were now screams of rage. Branches seemed to reach for me. The ground threatened to trip me up. After what felt like hours, I heard the soft sound of flowing water, the stream. I followed it, the forest gradually returning to its natural state. The whispers faded, and the familiar sounds of nature took their place. By dawn, I was out, the weight of the forest's secret heavy on my shoulders. I reported my findings, but a search of the forest revealed no cabin, no old man, no massive tree. The whispering path was gone, as if it had never existed. Some nights, when all is quiet, I can still hear the faintest of whispers, a chilling reminder of the forest's secret and its trapped souls, including the one that looks eerily like me. So as we sit here by this campfire, right on the edge of the woods, remember my tale. And if you ever hear a whisper calling you deeper into the forest, resist its pull, for you may never return. The Circle in the Woods. It was a summer like this one when I decided to spend a weekend camping alone. Solitude, nature, and the promise of the forest's embrace. Sounds inviting, doesn't it? But the forest keeps secrets, and that weekend I unearthed one of them. The day started ordinarily enough. Hiking, setting up camp, the reassuring warmth of a campfire. But as the sun dipped below the horizon, a dense fog began to roll in. Visibility dropped to mere feet, and the woods transformed into a place of silhouettes and whispers. Around midnight, I decided to venture out. Just a small walk to clear my mind. The fog had other plans. Each step seemed to take me further away from my campsite, the world muted and directionless. Just as panic was starting to set in, I stumbled upon a clearing, the fog slightly less dense here. At its center was a stone circle, ancient and moss-covered. It wasn't on any map I knew of. Curiosity momentarily overpowering my unease, I stepped inside the circle. Immediately, the fog outside thickened, forming an impenetrable wall. And then voices, whispers echoing from the distant past, started to speak. "Join us," they murmured, a multitude of voices speaking as one. From the foggy veil emerged figures, not quite human, not quite shadow. Their eyes, voids of absolute blackness, stared at me, their hands reaching out. The stone circle seemed to pulse with an energy, binding me within its confines. Terrified, I scrambled for the center of the circle, away from their grasp. And that's when I saw it. A gnarled tree, ancient and imposing, its roots intertwining with the stones. At the base of the tree, inscriptions, symbols older than time, seemed to writhe and change before my very eyes. The figures continued their advance, their whispers growing louder, more insistent. "Join us." Driven by desperation, I did the only thing that came to mind. I began to disrupt the inscriptions, scratching them out, breaking the pattern. The tree responded with a wail of pain and anger that echoed through the forest, and the figures recoiled. The dense fog began to dissipate, and the world of the woods, the real woods, started to solidify around me. The stone circle crumbled, and the figures faded into nothingness. Exhausted and shaken, I found my way back to my campsite. Morning light brought relief and the familiarity of the forest I knew, but the weight of the night's events bore heavily on me. I packed up and made my way out, vowing never to return. Weeks after that night, curious about what I'd encountered, I started researching local legends. Buried in the archives of the town's library, I found an old account, dated back to the early 1700s. It spoke of settlers who had stumbled upon ancient stones in the forest and of their attempts to harness its powers. But the circle demanded a price, a joining, a merging of spirits. Many disappeared, never to be seen again, while others returned, changed, their eyes as dark as the abyss. The account mentioned one more thing, a protector, a spirit bound to the circle to safeguard the forest from its influence. That gnarled tree, the ancient sentinel. Today, as we sit by this campfire, surrounded by the vastness of the woods, remember my tale. The forest is a place of beauty and mystery, but also of secrets best left undisturbed. And if you ever stumble upon a clearing, a circle of stones shrouded in fog, turn back. For not all who enter are fortunate enough to escape the grasp of the ancient ones, forever yearning to join with the living. The Forest of Frozen Faces. Listen closely, for the story I'm about to share isn't one I often recount, especially this close to the forest's edge. The truth of it still sends shivers down my spine. A word of advice: never venture too deep into the woods, especially after sunset. Here's why. A few years ago, as a challenge to myself, I decided to undertake a solo camping trip deep into this very forest. I had heard rumors of strange occurrences, but dismissed them as mere tales meant to spook children. The first day was enchanting. Birds chirping, the scent of pine in the air, the gentle rustle of leaves underfoot. As evening approached, I found a spot near a small clearing, set up my tent and lit a campfire. But as darkness fully enveloped the forest, the temperature dropped unnaturally fast. My campfire, which had moments ago been roaring, was now struggling, flickering weakly against the oppressive cold. And then silence. An eerie, unsettling silence. The kind that makes you hyper-aware of every sound, every heartbeat. Drawing my coat tighter, I decided to gather more firewood. As I ventured deeper into the woods, armed with only a flashlight, I stumbled upon a sight that made my blood run cold. Frozen faces, dozens of them. Not heads, not bodies. just faces protruding from tree trunks, their expressions forever frozen in terror. Their eyes, though immobile, seemed to follow my every move. I thought I was imagining things. I reached out to touch one. It was cold but undeniably human. The sensation was so real that I recoiled in horror. The moment I withdrew, the forest echoed with whispers. Indistinct but undeniably human. They seemed to emanate from the trees themselves, the very trees bearing those tormented faces. Overwhelmed by terror, I dropped my flashlight, plunging the forest into darkness. Blindly, I tried to find my way back to camp, but every turn took me deeper into the woods, past more and more frozen faces. Their silent screams and the ceaseless whispers pressed down on me from all sides. After what felt like hours, I saw a glimmer of light. My campfire! I ran towards it with all the strength I could muster, but as I neared, I realized the light was not coming from my campfire. Instead, it was another clearing, filled with floating orbs of light. Entranced, I walked closer, and saw that these were not mere orbs, but lanterns held by ghostly apparitions, figures dressed in old-fashioned attire, dancing in a never-ending loop to a haunting, silent melody. A figure detached from the group and approached me, her face obscured by a veil. She extended a hand, beckoning me to join. Every instinct screamed at me to flee, but I was paralyzed, caught in her spell. It was then that a sharp pain erupted on my cheek. I staggered back, hand flying to my face, feeling a cold numbness spread. The veiled woman let out an anguished cry, and the dancers turned to stare, their faces revealing the same terror I had seen on the trees. The pain was my salvation. It broke the trance, and I fled, not caring about direction, driven only by raw fear. The whispering grew louder, the forest denser. Dawn was breaking when I finally emerged from the woods, collapsing at the edge, exhausted but alive. My relief was short-lived as I felt the side of my face, the source of the earlier pain. A patch of skin, smooth, cold, and bark-like, was slowly forming. Panicking, I sought help, visiting doctors, specialists, even mystics. None could diagnose the condition, let alone halt its slow progression. It's been years now. I've managed to keep it in check, hidden, but the bark-like patch still remains, a constant reminder of that night. I share this tale not for sympathy, but as a warning. If you ever find yourself lost in these woods, turn back before you stumble upon the clearing, before you see the dancers, and before you meet the woman with the lantern. Because if you don't, you may become yet another face, forever frozen in terror, a silent witness to the forest's dark secret. Now, as we sit by this campfire, let the warmth remind you of the safety of the outside world. But remember, just beyond the light's reach, the forest watches, waits, and remembers. And as for me, I never venture deep into the woods anymore, especially after sunset. Neither should you.